Hi, Wayne. Welcome to the show.
Hina, great to be here, and I really look forward to our conversation. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's such a delight to see you today because I was going through your bio and you have such an interesting experience behind you. So I'm sure that our corporate audience who are listening to us right now, are going to really benefit from this conversation.
Thank you. I hope so.
Wayne, you have worked on 4 continents in about 90 cities and with people from over 100 cultures. It looks like such a diversified and rich experience. Please share it with us a bit.
So, of course, one of the favorite locations I have to say is India.
Yeah.
So I was first acquainted with India. Gosh, I think it was about 2006, and fell in love with the country, with the people, and I've been back there and spent a lot of time working in a large number of cities. Let's put it that way. So from east to west, from north to south, all over India, and I think you're sitting up near Delhi somewhere, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
one of my favorite areas. So yeah, but India is just one of the locations. So I'm Australian, born and bred there. Left. Many people call me a nomad, by the way. So I like to travel a lot, and that's led me to find opportunities to work in so many different locations. And presently, I'm sitting in Shanghai. My wife is Shanghainese, so I've been based in Asia for 18 years now, and spent some part of that in India, some part in Europe, some part in the States, some part in Asia. So it's really given me a rich experience and such an invaluable exposure to so many cultures. So I feel blessed.
Yeah, awesome. Like I am a traveler too. I solo travel a lot of times, and this is my favorite way of traveling, like travel alone. So it's like I can relate with that. Like traveling is something that enriches us so much.
Very much so. Yeah, it's I first traveled, maybe that's an interesting starting point. My first trip out of Australia was when I was 18 years old, and I went to Hong Kong. And the culture was so diverse to anything that I'd experienced in my short life at that stage that it instantly created the desire to keep traveling for the rest of my life. And that's pretty much what's happened. And it opened my eyes to the fact that in Australia in particular, we're so isolated. We're such a small population in the scheme of the world's population. And therefore, our life is very sheltered. Yeah. And having the exposure to, at that time, Asia, just blew my mind. And I from that moment forward, I couldn't get enough. Yeah. So here I am today.
That's wonderful. Wayne, you have spent 45 long years in the corporate world, working at all levels across functions and industries. And all working professionals look forward to growing in their corporate careers. As this show is about corporate professionals, and we have our corporate audience primarily. So what tips would you like to give to our listeners?
Yeah, so just on your point of 45 long years, you can tell, your viewers probably can't see, but you can tell by my silver-colored hair that it's been a very eventful 45 years. I've had the great pleasure and luxury, I guess, of some fantastic mentors and coaches over that period, and also working in so many different locations has really, as you said, enriched my experience. So I recently stepped away from the corporate world after the 45 years. So I'm now focused full time on my own company. But in leaving the corporation, I thought it might be a nice farewell gift to my team to leave them with 10 tips, if you like, on how they could maximize their career, not only from a professional perspective, but also in the private world as well. So I left them with each day, in the last 10 days, I left them with 1 tip a day. So if you like, I'm really happy to share that with you. And,
please share with us. We would love to know from you.
Some value for you. Right. All right. Well, I'll start from day 10 and work down to day 1. So day 10 was about how decisions shape our destiny. And there's so many people, like Tony Robbins is famous for this statement. I found it to be so true. If we are conscious of the decisions we're making versus allowing our unconscious minds to control our lives, then we are in far better control of that life and that decision process. So that's the first one. We can go very deep on it, but we have 10 to get through. So I'll just scratch the surface. Feel free to dive deeper if you like.
Sure.
The second one was, once you make that decision, is to ensure that you fully immerse yourself in whatever that decision was. So there's zero value if you decide to do something and then you go about it half-hearted. So the second tip was, once you decide, fully engage, fully immerse yourself to make the most of it.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
There's people like Daniel Pink has a great book called Drive. I'm not sure if you've ever read it. You probably have, Hina. One of the 3 areas that he talks about is mastery. To become a master, you have to be fully immersed. You have to be focused, diligent, everything around this concept of being immersed. So it's super, super important. The third tip was really a metaphor. So there's a saying, curiosity killed the cat. So my third tip was that's a fallacy. Curiosity didn't kill the cat. In actual fact, not being curious is what kills the cat.
Right.
Yeah. And curiosity is one of the golden nuggets for all leaders, for all executives in their career. They must be curious if they want to be successful. And so we talk about decisions shaping our destiny. I go further than that and I say curiosity shapes our growth.
Correct.
So each of these tips tend to stack onto each other.
Yeah.
The fourth one, which goes very closely with curiosity, is around failure. And it's really not fearing to fail. So in other words, you should be more fearful if you don't fail, because failure is one of the ways for us to learn. And the more that we can try, experiment, and learn through those experiments, then the more successful we're going to be long term. And a lot of people talk today about there is no such thing as failure. It's just a learning experience.
Right? Yeah, it's a learning experience. And I learned from my mentor that fail fast. If you want to succeed fast, you need to fail fast, because failure, we just call it a failure, though it's a learning experience. But then whatever it is, whatever we call it as, but then it has to happen in our lives, right? So in order to get there, there would be failures. So it's important to fail fast to get there fast.
Absolutely. And the IT industry is built around this premise now, right? So people like Google spend a lot of time and energy on looking at innovation, but testing it very quickly to see whether it's going to succeed or not. And so therefore they can fail fast. So it's very important. We shut ourselves down.
Correct.
Through the fear of failure. And so being more open and vulnerable really helps us to grow. And as you said, do it quickly. Don't take a long time to do it. Yeah, so bounce back. So that's the fourth tip. The fifth one that builds on that then is around the word grit. And I like to make associations. So I call grit and grit's cousin, resilience.
Right.
And so they are really the enemy of fear. So we're just talking about fear of failure. If you can learn to establish grit, and if we talk about Angela Duckworth and her work around grit, she uses two key words, passion and perseverance. And that's why I say resilience is a cousin of grit, because perseverance and resilience go so hand in hand. So being passionate, and there's a lot of debate about that word at the moment, but being passionate and persevering, so being gritty, and then learning to be resilient, meaning failing isn't the end of the process, it's just the beginning. So there's many expressions. Nelson Mandela had a great expression around this, talking about how to bounce back or bounce forward. In today's verbiage, we talk about bouncing forward. So regardless of how many times you fall down, it's not about the falling down, it's more important about getting back up.
Correct.
And so learning to be passionate, persevere, and then resilient is so critical for leaders in today's world.
I agree. Right? I agree with that completely.
Yeah. So there's the top five. There's the first five. Yeah. We went through them very quickly and we didn't go into too much detail, but hopefully people can start to make the linkage between each one. So then if we're clear about our decision-making process, we can do it consciously. When we do make that, we're fully immersed in the action. We're curious about what it is we're then doing. We're not frightened in doing that activity about failing. We're excited about it as a learning exercise. And we have the passion and perseverance, and we're resilient. That sets us up for the second tranche of tips. Fantastic. And the first one is around the questions that you ask. Yeah. So there was a book called Change Your Questions, Change Your Life. Yeah. I think it was written by Dr. Marilee Adams.
Beautiful book.
And it's a fantastic book. She gives us a choice map. Yeah. And essentially what she's saying in her book is that in every situation we have a choice. Yeah. Whether we realize it or not, it's so spontaneous we don't often acknowledge it, but we can choose to learn through the questions we ask. Yes. Or we can stay in our default mode, which tends to be the judger mode. And being a judger really sets us on that negative pathway, as opposed to being open and curious and wanting to learn. And we can make this transition through the type of question that we ask.
Right.
So if we learn to, when we're in a situation, if we learn to pause, if we can pause, step back from the situation for just a few seconds, and then consider what questions are going on in my head, in my inner dialogue. What is that self-talk saying to me, and how can I shape that so that it puts me in a different mindset. It heads me down that learner path, that path of curiosity and growth, versus that negative path where I'm playing the blame game. I'm looking to judge everybody else rather than perhaps learn from the experience. So change your questions, change your. I think it's a powerful metaphor.
It's a very powerful metaphor. Yes. And I also would like to say here that it's also about being conscious in and being aware in what we are thinking, because most of the time we are thinking on autopilot, right? It's all thinking patterns that we are blindly following. We are not even aware like what we are thinking right now, what's going on in our life and minds. So it's also the question of being aware at the same time.
Absolutely. So self-awareness is foundational to everything about ourselves, right? And that's a perfect segue into the next tip, which is around your habits. So as you said, being conscious of your environment, being conscious of your behavior, your actions, is something that most of us don't have a great control of.
Right.
And if you look at the studies, depending on the role that you play at any given time, the studies indicate between 45 to 95% of your actions, your behavior, your thoughts are generated through the basal ganglia area of your brain, right? Which is essentially your autopilot area. So you get up in the morning, you go through your normal routine, you're probably totally on autopilot at this stage. Your mind might be thinking about the meeting coming up, and while you're doing that, you're brushing your teeth, you're getting ready, you're having breakfast, and all of that is just happening
as a habit,
in tandem as a habit, right? So habits have the ability to be good or bad. And not all habits are bad, but the aim in being aware, as you said, being more conscious of your actions, gives you that opportunity to then change if you need to. So being aware of your habits is something that is so critically important if you really want to be if you want to be hugely successful. You have to be aware of the habits that are controlling your life and make the changes to the ones that are not controlling it in the way you want. So it's easy to say, however, but it takes a lot of willpower and a lot of effort to actually to make that transition. So it doesn't happen. Yeah, for sure. It doesn't happen just overnight. So that then leads into the bigger picture. So if you can imagine, the habit is something that happens in that moment, and they often stack on top of themselves. The next tip is around the routine. And so in this case, if you've read books like The Power of Habits and Atomic Habits, the routine that they talk about is part of the habit formation. What I'm talking about here is the broader routine, so the daily routine. So if you think that your habits stack up throughout the day, then if you can control those habits, you have a chance then to take the routine that you have in place during your day and really start to optimize. So if we look at our daily routine, if we look at a 24-hour day, just as an example, I like to break it into 4 blocks. So we have a block for when we're asleep, whether that's 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, it tends to be 1 block. Now, we don't do too much during that period. Our brain is still active, but physically we're not doing too much. So that leaves us with somewhere around 15, 16 hours of conscious activity. And so when I work with different leaders, often we will dissect those 16 hours into the remaining 3 blocks. And the aim here is to try and identify what is the most productive time of that 16 hours.
Yeah.
And we typically have a highly productive period, and we have a period where we're pretty much on autopilot. We're going through the motion, but we're tired, our brains need a rest, etc. So by being able to understand during the day what is your optimum period, you can then really start to focus on the activities that you're doing in that period and make the most of your day and your routine.
Right.
So we're getting to the pointy end. So that's tip number 8. So we're up to tip 8. So then tip 9 really then starts to cement all of those prior 8 into a conscious process of continuous or lifelong learning. And in today's world, and I'm a classic example. So up until the age of 27, I probably was lucky if I read 1 book a year. I was very active in my social life. I played a lot of sport, but I wasn't interested in learning anything new academically. I had very little presence about the need to grow for my career. I won't go into a lot of detail, but around the age of 27, that all turned on its head, if you like. And from that point forward, I became a lifelong learner. And I'm still learning today. So today I'm studying neuroscience.
Yeah, we are always work in progress, and we always need to keep learning until we are alive.
Absolutely, right. And even more important today than it was 20 years ago, with the rate of change in the workplace, through technology, through all of the things that are happening in our world at the moment. It's absolutely essential. There is no other way. There's a great study that identified that 30 years ago, or even further back, when I did my in Australia we call them the apprenticeship. So when I did my first study for my career, the skills that I acquired back then essentially lasted me 30 years. So I could utilize those skills, and with the way that business evolved, those skills stood me in a good place for about 30 years. Today, the estimate is about 3 years. So the skills that you learn today may or may not hold you where you need to be for the next 3 years. So you don't have any option other than to continually upgrade your skills, your knowledge, if you want to remain employed, basically.
Absolutely.
And for leaders, this is really scary. Because not only do they have a workforce that they have to ensure is staying skilled, but they themselves have to stay skilled. And with the rate of change at the moment, many of the more senior leaders are struggling with this degree of uncertainty about what it is that they need to learn. Right. And so it's one of those quandaries. It's easy to say, difficult to practice, but even more difficult at the moment to know what to practice. Right. So what is it I need to learn that's going to be useful for me in 5 years' time? But if you're doing nothing, there's a guarantee at the end of it that you're probably not going to stay employed for very long. Which then brings us to the final point. And the final point is probably the one that I hold dearest to my heart. And it's a very simple motto or mantra almost, if you like, and it is that we need to always be seeking ways of creating value.
Yeah.
Now, whether that's value for your customer, value for your employer, value for your family, whatever it may be, we have to, in today's world, and particularly with social media, the way we're connected at the moment, if you want to really maximize your success in your career and outshine your colleagues and your competitors, however you want to frame it, then you have to be the one that's creating more value than the rest.
Yeah.
So that you stand above those other people.
Right.
And so there's a very quick around the world insight on Wayne's 10 tips for advancing your career.
This is
and
beautiful. I
really
love
staying.
that. I really love that, Wayne. It's like it starts with decision and it ends with creating value. And it's such a, and everything is just arranged in layers that it's so super essential to work in those phases. So I absolutely love that. Thank you very much for sharing that with us today.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Wayne, I would like to know about your second book. I think you're working on your second book. When is it coming out and what's the book about?
Yeah, so this is a book that I'm co-authoring. So I'm working with a cohort of coaches, and the book is called Transforming Your Life. Okay. It's a sequel. I don't know which number we're up to at the moment. So it's really a series of short stories from coaches around the world.
Okay, that's interesting.
Who, similar to myself, have varied experiences, and we're sharing some part of that journey in this book. And as the title suggests, it's about moving through some challenges, some struggles, and finding our way to a successful outcome. So how to transform your life.
Awesome. Yeah. And when is it coming out?
I believe it will be end of March, early April this year.
Okay. Right. We're looking forward to it. And I'm going to include the link to the book, if it's there on pre-order, in the show notes section, so that our viewers and listeners, of course, now this show is available on YouTube also in the video format. Okay. So they can find it there and they can order your book. Wayne, what's the best way to contact you?
Probably the best way is on LinkedIn. And what's really interesting about LinkedIn, or you'll notice, is if people search Wayne Brown, they'll find probably a lot of Wayne Browns. So look me up under Wayne Brown, but you'll see that my suffix on the end of the LinkedIn address is the coach.
Okay.
The hyphen coach.
Right. Right. And also,
that's the best way to connect with me. Of course, you can go to our website.
Right. That's fine. I'm also going to include your contact information in the show notes section. So if you want to get in touch with Wayne for finding some really great, a coaching experience, you can always contact him.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I'm more than happy to respond to anyone that reaches out. So I look forward to chatting with your listeners or your viewers.
Fabulous. Wayne, it's such a wonderful conversation I've had with you today, and I'm loving the 10 tips that you have given to us today. So it's such a beautiful conversation, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it today, my time with you. So thank you very much for being on this show.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Hina. Great to have the opportunity.
Thank you, Wayne.